What is up, everybody? Chris Flick here, Chris Flick Podcast episode number 150. Today, we're calling this episode Malicious Reflections, and we're saying that in honor of James Franklin. And no, I'm not talking about the football coach from the Penn State University. I'm talking about James Franklin, the older brother to my boy, one of my favorite founding fathers, Ben Franklin. And in the 1700s, James Franklin published papers, right? He published opinions, he published the news. And one thing he was not afraid to do was to publish both sides of the debate, okay? Think about that into today's society. Where are we getting that? Are we getting that information where you can get both sides, side by side, right next to each other? Most likely not. Now, James said this, "I will publish your opinion as long as it was free from malicious reflections." All right? Free from malicious reflections. Now, what do I think that is? I'm thinking some hate, being hateful towards the other side, being super judgmental towards them without necessarily hearing them out. And this is an important thing here, because when you start to cloud out the other side, right? If you just cut them off and don't let them cite their opinions, eventually over time, another group might come in and then cut you off from your opinions, right? We live in a country where giving your opinion is important. There needs to be some freedom and some liberty there, right? That we could say what we want to say without malicious reflections and not face some sort of ramifications like getting kicked off a social media site or getting fired from your job. Now we go back to 825. I just finished this book, Why as a Muslim I Defend Liberty. And there's a quote from a caliph here that says, "Speak your disclaimer. Answer without fear. No one will threaten you with anything, nor should you be distressed personally in regard to anyone. This is the day on which the truth is to be made evident. With whomever there is any knowledge for the verification of his religion, let him speak." 829, and some of these Muslim-speaking countries, right? Arab-speaking countries, Muslim, we're at Medina, Baghdad. I'm not exactly sure where this caliph was from, right? But they had something called the House of Wisdom. It was an institute where Muslims, Christians, and Jews worked together on ancient texts. This reminded me of the Lyceum, right? My dream for my barn is to create my own little Lyceum out here, right? Where we have the ability to exercise your body and exercise your mind with public discourse, with debate, where people aren't going to get angry at one another, where you could come, you could speak openly, and then you could shake hands, you could give each other a high five, you could give somebody a hug, and you walk out the door, and your opinion on that person doesn't change, as long as with the way that they were speaking was free from malicious reflections. Now, I shared that from 829 because now, the author, Mustafa Akyul, of this book, who is a Muslim, who's trying to create a better picture for the Muslim religion, basically. Like, we are not all of these people you see in Afghanistan, doing evil things, or the Taliban, or whatever it is, right? He has a problem with the way a good chunk of his religion is handling situations. Now remember, in that same area where they were so open in the 800s, right? 800s, not 1800s, 800s. Nowadays, with such a zeal to ban anything that they find un-Islamic or is Islamically incorrect, authoritarian Muslims are imposing ignorance on their societies and enfeebling Muslim minds. The former president of Iran, some suppose that the more backwards, the more slow to progress, to use a different word that I'm not going to use here, a society is, the better protected its religion will be. So if you hold out information from your society by saying it is un-Islamic, or it's un-American, or it's insincere, right? If you hold back that information, you are going to weaken your society, all right? And if you weaken one, you're going to eventually start weakening more than one, all right? And then that chain of events starts to happen. Ben Franklin said that when men differ in opinion, both sides ought equally to have the advantage of being heard by the public. And that when truth and error have fair play, the former is always an overmatch for the latter. If given an opportunity, truth and error, right? Truth will prevail if given enough time and if given a fair opportunity. The prime example, this Muslim example that I just had here, from 800s to today, right? What a change of fortune here. Now, I know our country's a lot younger. We're only a couple of 100 years old, but we're starting to trend ourselves in a way that people are not given a fair shake anymore in terms of what they can and cannot say. You cannot respond You cannot use, you cannot use restriction as a form to advance. Now, the ACLU, the Cato Institute, there's some institutions here in this country that have been trying to fight for liberty and freedom of speech, to the point that in 1978, in Skokie, Illinois, the ACLU defended a neo-Nazi group's right to protest. They didn't agree with them, but they still said that those individuals have the right to speak. That's 1978. A little bit over 40 years later, and we're living in a different world and a different environment. Truth and sincerity have a certain distinguishing native luster about them which cannot be counterfeited. Truth and sincerity is all we could ask for. Public discourse needs to have freedom of thought. When you don't have freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom. We don't want to follow suit in what is going on in some of those Arab countries from the 800 to now, right? We don't want to follow that example. So we got to allow people to think freely, speak freely, in an effort to gain wisdom. Truth will win out. Peace, everybody.